I'm standing in my kitchen right now, staring out at this incredible lake view, the same view I worked endless 60-hour weeks to afford, but yesterday everything changed. The bank seized my parents' home while my mother's voice crumbled over the phone, each word soaked in desperation. They lost everything, and now they have absolutely nowhere to go. If you've ever felt the weight of guilt for having more than the people who raised you, stay with me. What happens next will shake you. Just 4 months before this moment, I was in this exact spot, champagne glass raised high, celebrating the purchase of my dream home. 3 spacious bedrooms, 2 full bathrooms, and a view of Lake Tahoe that real estate agents describe as priceless. My agent wasn't exaggerating when she said it was ideal for hosting friends and starting a family. I was engaged to Daniel, deep in wedding planning, imagining our future children growing up with that pristine water as their playground. But life has a cruel way of rewriting your story when crisis strikes without warning. My father lost his construction management career right as my mother received her cancer diagnosis. That double disaster obliterated their financial stability faster than I could process. Medical invoices piled higher each week, and the bank showed zero mercy when mortgage payments started coming in late. When I offered them my guest rooms, my father's voice was heavy with wounded pride. Just temporarily, he promised, until we stabilize, maybe we'll rent something small downtown. I was practically glowing with optimism as I gave them the grand tour. Take the primary guest suite. I insisted. The morning sunlight in there will be perfect for recovery, and the 3rd bedroom can be your workspace while you search for new opportunities. My mother wept when she saw the room I'd prepared. These weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, of gratitude. You're saving our lives, sweetheart. We'll repay every cent once we're back on our feet. Daniel wrapped his arm around me as we watched my parents explore what I believed was their temporary sanctuary. You have the biggest heart, he whispered. Just remember this is short term. We need our privacy for married life. I nodded with complete certainty. Of course this was temporary. This was a rescue operation, not a permanent living arrangement. My parents had always been fiercely independent people. They'd never want to burden their daughter longer than absolutely necessary. The first week felt like an extended family sleepover. My mother prepared elaborate meals as tokens of appreciation. My father repaired the squeaky door hinges and reorganized my cluttered garage. My younger brothers, Thomas and Kevin, 16 and 17, were thrilled about living near the lake. They helped unpack boxes, maintained the lawn without prompting, and Kevin even volunteered to assist with wedding preparations. This is what family means, my mother said one evening, squeezing my hand across the dinner table. We support each other through everything. I felt heroic, like I'd swooped in at exactly the right moment with exactly the right resources. But here's what I failed to understand then. Sometimes the people you risk, you don't actually want to be saved. Sometimes they just want a more comfortable place to settle in permanently. By week 3, bills started appearing in my mailbox. Nothing shocking at first. An extra 100 here and there for food. Utilities climbing gradually with 4 additional people using water and electricity constantly. Normal adjustments for a temporarily expanded household. What wasn't normal was my father's sudden fascination with my unfinished basement. This entire space is going to waste, he announced one Saturday morning, measuring tape in hand. I could establish a proper workshop down here. Maybe restart my furniture restoration work while I'm job hunting. Before I could fully process his proposal, he'd already begun sketching elaborate plans on scrap paper. It'll only be temporary, my mother added quickly, sensing my hesitation, just until we secure our own place, and naturally, he'd cover any modification costs. Naturally they would, except my father was unemployed and my mother was on disability payments. Where exactly would this modification money materialize from? But I was still operating under the naive assumption that this arrangement had a clear expiration date. Sure, I agreed, just keep modifications minimal and temporary. Within 1 week, my father had transformed my basement into a professional grade workshop. Nothing minimal about it. Industrial lighting systems, proper ventilation, work benches permanently bolted into concrete. He'd somehow acquired thousands of dollars worth of equipment while supposedly being financially devastated. Where did all this come from? I asked, running my fingers along an expensive router table. Your Uncle Frank was clearing out his garage. My father said, avoiding eye contact, lucky timing, right? Lucky timing seemed to follow my parents everywhere lately. Thomas and Kevin enrolled in the local high school. Just until we relocate, they assured me. Their friends began congregating at my house every afternoon, treating my kitchen like a convenience store and my living room like a private gaming arcade. Boys will be boys. My mother laughed when I mentioned the noise levels. At least they're not out getting into trouble. Meanwhile, my personal routines were vanishing. I couldn't work late anymore because the boys stayed awake until midnight gaming loudly. I couldn't invite friends over without my parents dominating every conversation. I couldn't walk from my bedroom to the kitchen in comfortable pajamas without considering whether I was dressed appropriately for family breakfast. My house was becoming their house, one small invasion at a time. Daniel noticed the transformation immediately. "This isn't sustainable," he said during one of our increasingly rare private dinners. "I can't even kiss you properly in your own kitchen without your mother offering us coffee. It's temporary." I repeated, that phrase becoming my daily mantra. "They'll find their own place soon." He raised an eyebrow. "When, exactly? Your father seems remarkably settled in that basement kingdom he's constructed." I wanted to defend my family, but the words caught in my throat. My father did seem suspiciously comfortable for someone supposedly desperate to move out, and my mother had started rearranging my furniture to create better conversation flow. That evening, I found myself calculating expenses on my laptop. Grocery costs had tripled. Utility bills were climbing toward absurd levels. I was working overtime constantly to cover costs that hadn't existed 5 weeks ago. But family helps family, right? This was just temporary sacrifice for the people I loved most. I closed the laptop and tried ignoring the growing knot in my stomach that whispered this temporary situation was beginning to look awfully permanent. 2 months in, and my beautiful lake house felt like a boarding house where I was the only person paying rent. My mother's temporary belongings started appearing piece by piece. A curio cabinet in my dining room for her china collection. Her favorite armchair positioned by my fireplace because the lighting is superior here. My father's recliner appeared in my living room because his back requires proper support after workshop hours. Where exactly is all this furniture coming from? I asked as Thomas and Kevin carried in another box labeled Mom's Books, storage unit. My mother explained, directing them toward my built-in shelves. We couldn't bear selling everything. Too many memories. Storage unit. They were paying monthly storage fees while claiming complete financial devastation. The mathematics wasn't adding up, but questioning it felt heartless while my mother was still recovering from chemotherapy. The breaking point arrived during my wedding dress fitting. I was standing on the fitting platform, watching the seamstress adjust my hem, when my mother launched into her latest financial crisis. The insurance company denied another claim. She sighed, dabbing her eyes. "We owe the oncologist $8,000 by next month, or they'll send it to collections." My reflection in the three-way mirror showed a bride-to-be, but all I could see was an exhausted woman working 12-hour days to keep everyone else financially afloat. "Maybe I can take on additional freelance projects," I heard myself saying. The seamstress glanced up with concern. "Sweetheart, you're getting married in 4 months. When exactly are you planning this extra work?" Excellent question. When was I planning anything wedding related? Every evening was consumed with family dinners, family discussions, family emergencies. Daniel and I hadn't had a private conversation about our ceremony in weeks. The wedding isn't going anywhere, my mother said dismissively. Health comes first, family comes first, correct. Family first, which apparently meant my wedding came last. That evening, Daniel found me crying over wedding vendor contracts. What's wrong now? He sat beside me, but kept his voice low. My parents were watching television 10 feet away in what used to be our intimate living space. I need to postpone the country club tasting, maybe cancel the honeymoon deposit. My mother needs stop. His voice was firmer than I'd ever heard it. Look at me. I turned from the laptop screen. This has to stop. Your family is consuming everything. Your time, your money, your energy, your happiness. And now they want your wedding too. It's just a postponement. We can reschedule, can we? He gestured around my living room, now dominated by my father's recliner and my mother's ceramic figurine collection. Because it looks to me like they're settling in permanently. When's the last time anyone mentioned finding their own apartment? I opened my mouth to answer and realized I couldn't remember. The conversations about temporary housing had simply evaporated. They need help, I whispered. They need boundaries, Daniel corrected, and we need our life back. From the kitchen came sounds of Thomas raiding my refrigerator and Kevin turning up his music. My parents' voices drifted from the TV area, planning Thomas's upcoming birthday party without consulting me. Daniel was right, but what was I supposed to do? Force my sick mother and unemployed father onto the street? 6 months. I said finally, give me 6 months to figure this out. Daniel stared at me for a long moment. 6 months to figure out what exactly? I didn't have an answer. Month 4 arrived with spring, weather, and my parents' declaration that they'd settled into a comfortable routine. Routine was an interesting word choice. What they'd actually accomplished was dividing my house like college roommates, except college roommates split expenses. My father controlled the basement and garage, where he'd launched a small furniture repair business using my home address. Customers dropping off antique chairs and damaged dressers at all hours. He proudly displayed the business cards he'd printed. Frank's Restoration. Quality craftsmanship since 1985. No mention that this business operated from his daughter's property without permission. It's generating some income, he beamed, showing me a handful of $20 bills, maybe $50 last week. Every bit helps, right? $50, while I was covering his family's grocery bills that easily topped $300 weekly. My mother had transformed my kitchen into her personal domain. My carefully organized spice rack was replaced with her bulk seasonings from discount warehouses. My minimalist countertops now hosted her bread maker, dehydrator, and collection of ceramic canisters that add warmth. You young people don't understand how to make a house feel like a home, she said, arranging another doily under another decorative bowl. A home needs character. My house had plenty of character before she decided it needed her special touch. The boys had claimed the family room as their personal headquarters. Kevin's gaming console was permanently connected to my television. Thomas's guitar amplifier lived in the corner. Their school backpacks were dumped by my front door every afternoon like they owned the place, which apparently they did now. We should discuss chores, I mentioned during dinner one evening, attempting casual conversation. Everyone living here should help maintain the household. 4 pairs of eyes stared at me like I'd suggested something outrageous. Sweetheart, my mother said carefully, your father and I are managing serious health and employment challenges. Adding stress about housework seems unfair. And Thomas and Kevin have school and athletics. My father added, their education has to come first, right? Everyone's priorities superseded basic household responsibilities. How foolish of me to expect the people consuming my food and utilities to occasionally load a dishwasher. Daniel stopped visiting entirely. I feel like a stranger in your house, he explained over dinner at a downtown restaurant. Your family looks at me like I'm intruding on their territory. Their territory. I wanted to argue, but I'd seen those looks. The way my father changed channels when Daniel tried watching sports. The way my mother dominated conversations, never asking Daniel about his work or interests. The way Thomas and Kevin treated him like an annoying older brother instead of their sister's fiancé. After we're married, it'll be different. I said weakly. We'll establish boundaries then. Daniel set down his fork. Listen to yourself. After we're married, they're not planning to leave after your wedding. They're planning to stay through your wedding. What do you mean? I mean they've never once mentioned apartment hunting, never once discussed their move about timeline, never once acknowledged how this arrangement affects our relationship. My stomach clenched because he was absolutely correct. Your mother asked me yesterday if we'd consider postponing our honeymoon because she might need help recovering from a dental procedure. The breadstick in my hand crumbled. She what? A dental procedure. Not emergency surgery, not a cancer relapse. Routine dental work that apparently requires her daughter to cancel her honeymoon. I sat in that restaurant booth watching my fiancé's patience finally reach its breaking point, and I realized something terrifying. My family wasn't temporarily staying in my house. I was permanently trapped in theirs. Wedding planning became a solo endeavor. I'd sneak out during lunch breaks to meet with florists and photographers, making decisions alone that should have involved my fiancé. But Daniel had reached his limit of family, dominated evenings and uncomfortable dinners where my parents treated him like a visitor instead of the man I was marrying. You know, my mother mentioned one morning while I rushed to get ready for work, "You're spending an awful lot of money on this wedding when we have genuine financial pressures." I paused, mascara wand halfway to my lashes. What do you mean? $8,000 for a photographer. That seems excessive when your father still owes money to contractors from his business. His business, the furniture restoration operation he ran from my basement while contributing zero to household expenses. The photographer is important to me. I said carefully, I want professional wedding photos. My mother sighed dramatically, rearranging the pill organizer she kept on my kitchen counter. I just think priorities matter, sweetheart. Family needs versus wedding wants, right? My wedding was a want, but my father's workshop equipment had been a need. That afternoon, I received the call that changed everything. "Miss Thompson." The voice was crisp and professional. "This is Janet from Mountain View Oncology. We need to discuss your mother's outstanding balance." My heart rate spiked. Is she okay? Did something happen? She's medically fine, but we show an outstanding balance of $12,000 for treatment. Insurance covered most costs, but the patient responsibility portion is past due. $12,000. Not the $8,000 my mother had mentioned, and she'd said they owed the oncologist, but this was a completely different medical group. "Can you hold, please?" I asked, my hand trembling as I set down the phone. I pulled up my online banking and started calculating. Over the past 4 months, I'd been covering groceries, utilities, household supplies, and random family emergencies. The numbers were staggering, nearly $15,000 beyond my normal monthly expenses. But my parents were receiving disability payments and unemployment benefits. Where was that money going? "Miss Thompson." Janet's voice was patient but firm. "Will you be able to make a payment today? Let me call you back." That evening, I attempted the most uncomfortable conversation of my adult life. "We need to discuss finances." I announced during dinner, "I need to understand where everyone's money is going." The table went completely silent. Forks suspended midair. Chewing stopped. Even Thomas's constant foot tapping paused. "That's a very personal question. My father said finally, "I think I've earned the right to ask personal questions." I replied, surprising myself with my directness. "I've been covering household expenses for 4 months, while everyone else's income remains a complete mystery. Your father's unemployment barely covers his medications," my mother said, her voice taking on that wounded tone that usually made me backtrack immediately. "Not this time. What about your disability payments? What about the boys' part-time jobs? Those are for their personal expenses." My father answered, "Clothes, gas money, dating. Teenage boys have needs. Teenage boys have needs, but apparently engaged daughters have unlimited bank accounts." "I can't cover the medical bills," I said finally, "not if I want to have any kind of wedding." The reaction was immediate and devastating. My mother's eyes filled with tears. My father's face darkened with disappointment. Thomas and Kevin shifted uncomfortably, suddenly fascinated by their plates. "After everything we've been through," my mother whispered, "you're choosing a party over your family's health." A party. My wedding was a party in her mind. "It's not choosing," I protested, already feeling myself weakening under their collective disappointment. "It's just, I need some limits." But the damage was done. The remainder of dinner was conducted in wounded silence while I sat there feeling like the most selfish daughter in the world. Later that night, I found myself researching personal loans and credit card cash advances. Maybe I could find the money somewhere. Maybe I could make this work without choosing between my family and my future. Maybe I was the problem. 3 weeks before my wedding, everything shattered with a single phone call I was never supposed to hear. I was working late at the office, trying to catch up on projects I'd been neglecting while managing family crises. Around 7 in the evening, I realized I'd forgotten to ask what my mother wanted for dinner, so I called the house. My father answered on the second ring. "Hello? Hey, Dad, it's me. What should I pick up for dinner on my way home?" "Steaks would be good. Get those ribeyes from that fancy market you like." "Fancy ribeyes for the family that couldn't afford their medical bills. Okay, I'll grab some vegetables too. See you soon. Hang on." My father's voice became muffled as he turned away from the phone. I heard him talking to someone in the background, his voice carrying that tone people use when they think they're completely private. What I heard next stopped my world entirely. "She's such a burden on our lives." My father's voice came through crystal clear. He thought he'd hung up, but the call was still connected. Always working those hours, always stressed, always asking questions about money. I wish she would just disappear. My mother's voice joined in. "Move away or something. We were doing perfectly fine before she started playing savior." My hand started shaking so violently I nearly dropped the phone. "The house is perfect, though," my father continued. "Best thing that ever happened to us was that foreclosure got us upgraded living for free. And she's so guilty about everything, she won't even fight back when we ask for money." My mother added, "It's like having a personal ATM that cooks dinner." They were laughing. Actually laughing about how easily they'd manipulated me. "Think she'll go through with the wedding?" My mother asked. "Doesn't matter." My father replied, "Daniel will move in here too, or she'll break up with him. Either way, we keep the house situation." I hung up so hard my desk lamp rattled. For 10 minutes, I sat in my office chair, staring at nothing, feeling everything I'd believed about my family crumble like a demolished building. They didn't see me as their daughter. They saw me as a resource to be exploited. They weren't grateful for my help. They thought they deserved it. They didn't love me. They loved what I provided. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "How was your day? Miss you." I stared at that message for a long time. Daniel, who'd been begging me to see what I'd been too guilty to acknowledge. Daniel, who'd watched me destroy my own happiness to please people who viewed my kindness as weakness. I typed back, "Can you meet me? We need to talk. Important." An hour later, we sat in his truck outside my office building while I told him everything I'd overheard. His face went through a dozen expressions: anger, sadness, relief, determination. "I'm so sorry," he said finally, pulling me against his chest. "But I'm also not surprised. What do? I whispered into his shirt, breathing in his familiar scent for the first time in weeks without feeling rushed or guilty. "Remember that job offer I got in Colorado?" His voice was gentle but excited. "The construction management position in Denver." I pulled back to look at him. "The one you turned down because of my situation. They called yesterday, positions still available, better salary, company housing assistance, fresh start." He cupped my face in his hands. "Come with me. Let's get married and build our own life somewhere they can't touch it." For the first time in months, I could actually see a future that belonged to me. What about the house? Sell it. Take the money and run. Sell it. The idea was so simple, so obvious. I wondered why it had never occurred to me before. Because I'd been raised to believe that family mattered more than my own happiness, that sacrifice was noble and boundaries were selfish. But sitting in Daniel's truck, still hearing my parents' cruel laughter in my memory, I finally understood the difference between love and exploitation. "Let's do it," I said, and meant it completely. This time tomorrow, my real life would finally begin. The next morning, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. While my family slept in their claimed territories throughout my house, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and started researching Denver real estate agents. If I was going to disappear, I needed to do it correctly. I called in sick to work, first time in 2 years, and drove to the most expensive real estate office in town, the kind that handled $1 million Lake properties for people who knew how to maintain discretion. "I need to sell quickly and quietly," I told Rebecca Martinez, a sharp-eyed agent who didn't flinch when I explained my timeline requirements. "The current occupants can't know it's on the market." "Difficult family situation?" she asked with practiced neutrality. "You could say that," Rebecca nodded. "We can list it as by appointment only and schedule showings when they're out. With a property this desirable in the current market, we should have offers within days." That afternoon, while my father was in his basement kingdom and my mother was at her weekly doctor's appointment, I signed the listing agreement. Rebecca took professional photos of my beautiful home, carefully editing out all traces of my family's invasion. The listing went live at midnight with a price that would guarantee quick action. "What do you think it's worth?" Daniel asked over dinner at a restaurant across town, far from anywhere my family might randomly appear. "Enough for a house in Denver, a wedding that's actually ours, and maybe even that photography studio I've always wanted to open." I felt lighter than I had in months, like someone had finally untied the anchor dragging me underwater. My phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. "Where are you? Mom made your favorite pasta." My favorite pasta, the one I'd specifically asked her to stop making because it reminded me of my ex-boy, friend from college, but she kept preparing it because she liked it. "Coming home," I texted back, though home was starting to feel like a foreign concept. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd worked overtime for months to support a family that saw me as their personal bank account, while secretly planning to escape with the very house money they thought belonged to them too. When I walked through my front door that evening, the scene was perfectly staged. My father emerged from his workshop with sawdust in his hair, playing the part of the hardworking patriarch. My mother bustled around the kitchen, the devoted wife managing everyone's dinner. Thomas and Kevin were doing homework at my dining table, the responsible students focused on their education, all of it funded by me, all of it performed for my benefit. "There's my working girl," my father said, clapping me on the shoulder. "Long day building that nest egg, if only he knew how right he was," Rebecca Martinez called today. I said casually while helping my mother set the table, something about property assessments in the neighborhood. Did anyone talk to a real estate agent? My mother frowned. "No, why would we? We're not going anywhere anytime soon. This arrangement is working perfectly for everyone. Working perfectly for everyone. That was certainly one way to describe financial parasitism. During dinner, they chatted about their weekend plans with an enthusiasm that made my blood pressure spike. Thomas's birthday is coming up. My mother announced, "We're thinking of taking the boys skiing up at North Star. Make it a long weekend celebration. Skiing." I set down my fork. "That's expensive." "Oh, we found a great deal." My father said quickly, "Package includes lift tickets and equipment rental. Sometimes you have to invest in family memories, right?" The family that owed $12,000 in medical bills had found money for a luxury ski weekend. The same family that needed me to cover grocery bills was planning a mountain resort vacation. "How much is this great deal?" I asked. "Don't worry about it, sweetheart." My mother patted my hand. "We've been saving up. Besides, the boys work so hard in school. They deserve some fun." "They deserve some fun, but I deserve to fund their lifestyle indefinitely." "When are you planning to go?" The question came out sharper than intended. "This weekend," Kevin said excitedly. 3 days of perfect powder, according to the weather report. This weekend. While I'd been planning my escape, they'd been planning their getaway. The timing was almost too perfect. After dinner, I retreated to my bedroom and called Rebecca. "Any interest yet?" I asked, though the listing had only been live for 6 hours. 3 showings scheduled for tomorrow, 2 more on Saturday. 1 buyer's flying in from San Francisco specifically to see it. Cash offer potential. Can you schedule them all for this weekend? The occupants will be out of town. Perfect, I'll make it happen. As I hung up, I heard Thomas and Kevin arguing about snowboard versus ski rentals in the living room below. The casual way they discussed expensive details for a trip they supposedly couldn't afford would have been impressive if it wasn't so infuriating. That night, I lay in bed listening to my family plan their vacation with money they claimed not to have, while I planned my liberation with money they'd assumed would always be available. Sometimes justice has a sense of humor. Friday morning arrived with my mother bustling around my kitchen, packing snacks for their ski trip like she was organizing a military operation. "I made extra sandwiches in case you get hungry while we're gone," she called out, stuffing a cooler with enough food to feed a small army. "There's leftover casserole in the fridge, and I picked up that ice cream you like. Taking care of me. How thoughtful of someone who'd called me a burden 3 days ago. Have fun," I said, watching my father load their luggage into the car I'd been making payments on. "Drive safely. We'll miss you, honey." My mother hugged me tight, and for a split second, I almost felt guilty about what I was planning. Almost. Then Thomas emerged from the house wearing brand new ski gear that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget, and the guilt evaporated entirely. "Sweet jacket," I commented. "When did you get that?" "Yesterday." He grinned. "Dad said I needed proper gear for the mountain. Can't have me looking like a beginner up there." Can't have him looking like a beginner, but they could have me looking like an idiot for believing their sob stories about financial hardship. I waved goodbye from my front porch as they drove away in their packed car, heading for a weekend that would cost more than most people's monthly rent. The same people who'd been crying poverty for 4 months while I worked overtime to keep them comfortable. The irony was delicious. While they enjoyed their luxury vacation, I'd be conducting the business transaction that would finally free me from their manipulation. Rebecca called 30 minutes later. "The San Francisco buyer wants to see it at noon," she said. "Can I bring him by?" Perfect timing. I spent the morning erasing evidence of my family's occupation, packed away my mother's doilies and ceramic collections, stored my father's scattered business papers, cleared Thomas and Kevin's gaming equipment from the living room. For the first time in months, my house looked like mine again. The buyer was exactly what Rebecca had promised: serious, qualified, and holding a pre-approval letter that made my realtor's eyes light up like Christmas morning. "The lake access is private?" he asked, standing on my deck overlooking the crystal. "Clear water, completely private, your own sandy beach, perfect for kids or just peaceful mornings." He walked through each room, taking notes, asking intelligent questions about systems and maintenance. In the basement, he paused at my father's elaborate workshop setup. "This is impressive. Does the equipment convey with the property?" I thought about my father's pride in his tools, his business cards with my address, his assumption that he could operate indefinitely from my basement. "No," I said, "the current occupant will be removing all personal items." By 3 in the afternoon, I was signing a purchase agreement for $20,000 over my asking price, with a cash close in 18 days. The buyer wanted the house for his growing family, kids who would actually belong there instead of treating it like a free hotel. "Congratulations," Rebecca said, shaking my hand. "You just made the fastest sale I've handled this year." I thought I'd feel elated, but instead I felt hollow. Relief mixed with sadness, mixed with anticipation of the storm that was coming. That evening, I called Daniel with the news. 950,000. I said, still not quite believing the number. "Holy, that's enough for a house in Denver, a wedding, a honeymoon, and probably a car too. And student loan payoff, an emergency fund, and maybe even a down payment on that photography studio I've always wanted to open." For the first time in months, I was making plans that had nothing to do with other people's needs and everything to do with my own dreams. "When do they get back from skiing?" Daniel asked. "Sunday night. I'll tell them Monday morning." "You sure you want to do it face after what you heard them say?" I'd been debating that question all week. Part of me wanted the confrontation, wanted to see their faces when they realized their golden goose had flown the coop. But a bigger part of me was just exhausted from months of manipulation and guilt trips. "Maybe not." I said finally, "Maybe they don't deserve an explanation. They definitely don't deserve an explanation." Sunday evening, I watched them return from their vacation, laughing and sunburned, carrying shopping bags full of resort souvenirs. Thomas was sporting expensive sunglasses. Kevin had a new hoodie with the North Star logo. And my parents looked more relaxed than I'd seen them since before my father lost his job. Funny how a weekend of luxury skiing could cure financial stress so effectively. "How was your weekend, sweetheart?" my mother asked, hugging me while still wearing her designer ski jacket. "Did you miss us?" "It was very productive," I said truthfully. "I got a lot accomplished." "Good for you," my father said, already heading toward his basement workshop. "Back to the grind tomorrow. Back to the grind." If only he knew that tomorrow would bring a very different kind of grinding. What do you think will happen next? Drop your predictions in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you've ever had to make a difficult decision about toxic family members. Monday morning, I called in sick to work for the second time in a week. My family had already settled back into their comfortable routines, my father in his workshop, my mother rearranging my kitchen to suit her preferences, Thomas and Kevin getting ready for school in the bedrooms they'd claimed as their own. While they lived their lives in my house, I was about to reclaim my life entirely. The moving truck arrived at 8 in the morning, just after Thomas and Kevin left for school. I'd hired professionals and paid extra for speed and discretion. 3 hours to pack everything that mattered and load it into the truck heading for Denver. My clothes, my personal photos, my grandmother's jewelry, the few pieces of furniture that held real meaning. I left behind everything my family had infiltrated, the kitchen appliances my mother had replaced with her versions, the living room furniture my father had rearranged for better television viewing, the expensive linens I'd bought that were now permanently stained with their lives. They could keep it all. In 18 days, it would be someone else's problem. The hardest part was listening to them go about their morning routines while I systematically erased myself from the house. My mother humming in the kitchen as she made my father's coffee, My father's power tools humming in the basement as he worked on some client's project. The comfortable sounds of people who felt completely secure in their surroundings. By 11 in the morning, the truck was loaded and pulling away from my lake house for the last time. I sat in my car for a few minutes, looking at the home I'd dreamed of for years, saved for, worked overtime to afford. It was beautiful, perfect, everything I'd wanted when I'd signed those mortgage papers 8 months ago. But it had never really been mine. Not once my family decided it belonged to them too. I pulled out the envelope I'd prepared and walked to the front door one last time. The letter inside was brief, direct, and probably the most honest thing I'd ever written to my parents. Your wish has come true. The house has been sold, and your burden is leaving your lives. You have 20 days to vacate the property and find your own housing. Don't try to contact me. I slipped the envelope under the door, got back in my car, and drove toward the highway that would take me to my new life. 3 hours later, I was crossing into Nevada when my phone started ringing, my mother's number. I watched it go to voicemail, then ring again immediately. My father's number this time, then my mother again, then the house phone, then Thomas's cell, then Kevin's cell, then my mother again. By the time I stopped for gas in Reno, I had 17 missed calls and 12 voicemail messages. I listened to the first one. Honey, there's been some mistake. My mother's voice was shaky, confused. We came home and found this crazy letter about selling the house. Someone's playing a terrible joke. Call us back immediately. I deleted it without listening to the rest. The next message was my father, his voice sharp with authority. Whatever game you're playing, it's